A face from the past. The deep rumble of the Norton Commando 961 echoed through the quiet streets of Los Angeles. The city was asleep, its golden lights flickering in the distance. A light fog rolled over the pavement, softening the harsh glow of the street lamps. Keanu Reeves rode through the near-empty roads, his black leather gloves gripping the handlebars firmly. His thoughts drifted far from the winding streets. Memories of the past, old lessons, and a time when he was just a young boy with a dream. Then, something caught his eye. A lone figure sat on the sidewalk, wrapped in a tattered blanket. Their head hung low, arms curled tightly around themselves. Just another lost soul in the city, Keanu thought at first. Homelessness was a tragic part of Los Angeles, a problem he had seen too often. But as he slowed down, something stirred inside him. An uneasiness, a strange familiarity. His heart stopped. Keanu hit the brakes hard, the tires screeching slightly as his motorcycle came to a halt. He stared at the man sitting there in the dim light of a broken street lamp. It couldn't be. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. It was his old Teatro teacher, the ghost of yesterday. Memories flooded his mind. Mr. Lionel Carter, the man who had believed in him when no one else had. The man who had taught him how to express emotion, how to find strength in vulnerability, and how to tell stories that could touch people's hearts. Keanu still remembered his teenage years, struggling through lines, feeling like he didn't belong. Mr. Carter had been the one who encouraged him, who told him that acting wasn't just about pretending. It was about feeling, about being real. But now Mr. Carter was sitting here, his once proud shoulders slumped, his clothes tattered and dirty. Keanu took off his helmet, his chest tightening. Could it really be him? He stepped off his bike and approached slowly, his boots tapping against the pavement. The man barely moved. He was thin, his hair tangled, and his face was hidden behind a rough beard. "Sir." Keanu's voice was soft, but the moment the word left his lips, the man flinched. For a second, there was no recognition. Then the man lifted his head, and Keanu's breath caught in his throat. It was him. Mr. Carter's once bright eyes were now sunken and tired. His hand shook as he looked up, confusion washing over his face. It was clear he was exhausted, cold, and perhaps even ill. "Mr. Carter, it's me," Keanu whispered, his voice thick with emotion. The older man blinked as if struggling to recognize him. Then, slowly, like an old film reel playing back after years of dust, understanding dawned in his eyes. "Keanu," he croaked. His voice was weak, barely more than a whisper. Keanu felt his heart clench. "Yes, it's me." A painful truth. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them continued. Cars passing in the distance, neon lights flashing from a nearby convenience store. But for them, time had stopped. "What happened to you?" Keanu asked, his voice barely holding back the emotion. Mr. Carter chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. "Life happened, kid." His words were sharp, but his voice carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories, of years lost in struggle. Keanu couldn't believe it. How could the man who had once inspired so many young artists, who had shaped so many futures, end up here? "I thought you were still teaching," Keanu said, kneeling beside him. "Not anymore." Mr. Carter sighed, his voice raspy. "The theater closed. Funding ran out. I tried to hold on. But well, you see where I ended up." He gave a small, broken smile, but Keanu could see the pain behind it. Something in Keanu's chest twisted. This wasn't right. This wasn't fair. The man who had once given him so much was now left with nothing. Keanu reached into his pocket, pulling out a few $100 bills. "Come on, let me help you." But Mr. Carter shook his head. "No." His voice was firm, though his hands trembled. "I don't want charity." Keanu swallowed hard, understanding the pride behind those words. But this wasn't about charity. This was about gratitude, about repaying a debt that could never truly be repaid. He knew that money alone wouldn't fix this. So he made a decision, one that would change everything. A promise made. Keanu stood up, his eyes locked onto Mr. Carter's. Then don't see it as charity. See it as what it is, a thank you. Mr. Carter hesitated. Keanu crouched again, his voice softer now, almost pleading. You helped me when I had nothing. When I was just a kid, unsure of myself. You saw something in me when no one else did. You believed in me. Keanu's throat tightened, but he pushed through. Now, let me believe in you. Mr. Carter's lips parted slightly, as if he wanted to argue. But then, slowly, the fight drained from his eyes. For the first time that night, Keanu saw something flicker in the man's gaze. Hope. Keanu reached out his hand. Come with me. A long pause. Then, finally, Mr. Carter reached out. Their hands met. And at that moment, the past and present collided. The teacher and student, the lost and the found. And so, a new journey began. The road to redemption. The cold night air wrapped around them as Keanu Reeves helped his former Teatro teacher, Mr. Lionel Carter, to his feet. The years of struggle had weighed down on the older man, his steps unsteady, his once powerful posture now frail and uncertain. Keanu could feel the resistance in his grip, the way Mr. Carter hesitated, as if leaving that sidewalk meant leaving behind some invisible battle he had been fighting for years. Keanu tightened his grip, his voice gentle but firm. Let's get out of here, sir. Mr. Carter exhaled, nodding. He was exhausted, tired of fighting, tired of being alone. As Keanu led him toward his black Norton Commando 961, the reality of the situation hit him harder. How had it come to this? This man had once been larger than life, a force in the theater world, a mentor whose passion had ignited the dreams of young actors, including Keanu himself. But now he was just another forgotten soul in a city that had no mercy for the weak. Keanu handed him his extra helmet, but Mr. Carter waved it off. Don't need it, he muttered. If I fall, I fall. Keanu stared at him for a moment before shaking his head. Not on my watch. With slow movements, Keanu carefully fastened the helmet onto his old teacher's head, ensuring it was secure. Then, with surprising ease, he helped him onto the back of the motorcycle. As they rode through the quiet Los Angeles streets, Keanu could feel the weight of Mr. Carter behind him, not just physically, but emotionally. This wasn't just a ride to a warm home. This was a ride back to dignity, to a life that had once been full of purpose, a place to call home. Keanu's house wasn't a grand mansion like many would expect. He had always lived simply, preferring comfort over excess. It was a spacious home, warm and inviting, but not ostentatious. When they arrived, Keanu parked the bike and turned to help Mr. Carter off. The older man looked up at the house, hesitating at the doorstep. You don't have to do this, Keanu, he murmured. Keanu's jaw tightened. I know I don't. He opened the door. But I am. The warmth of the house washed over them, a stark contrast to the cold of the streets. Mr. Carter stepped inside hesitantly, as if afraid he didn't belong. Keanu walked ahead, flipping on the lights. Come on, sit, he urged, motioning toward the couch. Mr. Carter hesitated before finally lowering himself onto the soft cushions. He sank into them, and Keanu could see the exhaustion in his body, not just from the night, but from years of struggle. Keanu disappeared into the kitchen and returned moments later with a hot bowl of soup, fresh bread, and a bottle of water. Mr. Carter looked at the food, but didn't touch it. I don't need pity, he muttered. Keanu sat across from him, his eyes serious. This isn't pity, he said. This is a thank you. There was silence between them for a long moment. Then, finally, Mr. Carter reached out, his frail hands trembling as he picked up the spoon. With the first sip of warm soup, Keanu saw something flicker in his tired eyes. Relief. Maybe even a little bit of hope. rebuilding a broken soul. Over the next few days, Mr. Carter slept more than he spoke, his body finally allowing itself to rest. Keanu didn't push him. He let him heal at his own pace, knowing that some wounds weren't just physical. They ran deeper, into the soul. But Keanu also knew that shelter and food weren't enough. Mr. Carter needed something more than survival. He needed purpose. One morning, Keanu found him sitting on the balcony, staring at the horizon. "You ever miss it?" Keanu asked, leaning against the railing. "Miss what?" "The stage." Mr. Carter chuckled, though there was no humor in it. "It doesn't miss me," he muttered. "I've been gone too long." Keanu studied him. "You're wrong," he said after a moment. "The world needs people like you. I needed you. And there are others out there who still do." Mr. Carter sighed. "I'm too old for this now." Keanu smirked. Age never stopped Morgan Freeman. The older man actually laughed at that. A real laugh. Not the bitter chuckle Keanu had heard before. And for the first time in years, Mr. Carter looked like a man who had once inspired greatness. A plan in motion. That night, Keanu made a decision. He picked up his phone and made a call. "Hey, David, I need a favor." David was a renowned theater director in Los Angeles, someone Keanu had worked with before. "What's up, man?" "I need an acting coach," Keanu said. "An experienced one. Someone who knows the craft inside out." David hesitated. "For who?" Keanu smiled. "A legend." The next morning, Keanu walked into the living room, where Mr. Carter was slowly flipping through an old book. He set a cup of coffee down in front of him. "What's this?" Mr. Carter asked. "An opportunity." Mr. Carter looked up, frowning. "For what?" "To teach again." The older man stiffened. Keanu met his gaze. "The world hasn't forgotten you, and I won't let you forget yourself." A light in the darkness. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as Keanu Reeves set a steaming mug in front of Mr. Lionel Carter, his former theater teacher. The older man sat on the balcony, dressed in a clean sweater Keanu had given him, looking healthier than he had in years. Though his beard was still thick and streaked with silver, there was color in his face again, a small but significant difference. But something was still missing. Keanu saw it in his eyes, a deep emptiness, the lingering shadow of defeat. The past had buried Mr. Carter under years of regret, failure, and abandonment. Keanu wasn't just trying to help him get back on his feet. He was trying to bring him back to life. And today, Keanu was ready to push him toward something greater. A call to the stage. Keanu pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. "What's this?" Mr. Carter asked, picking it up. "An invitation." Mr. Carter frowned. Keanu leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "It's from David Monroe. He runs one of the best theater programs in LA. He's looking for an acting coach." Silence. Mr. Carter stared at the phone, his fingers tracing over the screen absent-mindedly. His expression was unreadable, but Keanu could see the storm behind his eyes. "I'm not an acting coach anymore," Mr. Carter muttered, setting the phone down. Keanu didn't back down. "You're still the best teacher I've ever had," he said, his voice low and serious. "And I know there are students out there who need someone like you." Mr. Carter sighed, rubbing his temples. "Keanu, you don't understand," he murmured. "I haven't been on a stage in years. I wouldn't even know where to begin." Keanu smiled. "Then let's start at the beginning." Stepping back into the past. The next morning, Keanu didn't give Mr. Carter a choice. He drove them straight to an old dusty theater downtown, one that Mr. Carter had performed in decades ago. The building wasn't much anymore. The sign was faded, the entrance worn. Time had taken its toll, just like it had on Mr. Carter. But inside, the moment they stepped through the doors, something shifted in the air. The stage still stood proud, though the wood was scratched and scuffed. Red velvet curtains lined the back, faded but still regal. The seats were empty, but Keanu could almost hear the echoes of an audience that had once filled them. And then he saw it, the look in Mr. Carter's eyes. For a brief moment, the older man wasn't a broken man anymore. He was young again, vibrant, full of passion. Keanu nudged him forward. "Go on," he said softly. Mr. Carter hesitated, then slowly, as if drawn by some unseen force, stepped toward the stage. His fingers traced the edge of the wooden platform, his gaze lost in memories. "I spent my best years here," he whispered. Keanu nodded. "I know." There was a long silence. Then finally, Mr. Carter took a breath, a deep, cleansing breath, and stepped onto the stage. For the first time in years, he was home. Awakening the fire, Keanu sat in the empty front row, watching. He had seen Mr. Carter command a stage before, but not like this. This wasn't a performance. This was something deeper, a soul reclaiming itself. Mr. Carter took another breath. His fingers clenched and unclenched. He turned his head slightly, as if listening for an audience that wasn't there. Then, suddenly, he spoke. Not to Keanu. Not to anyone. Just to the stage itself. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" His voice was soft at first, uncertain. But then, something inside him cracked open, and his tone grew stronger, richer. "Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May." Keanu felt chills run down his spine. It was Shakespeare, and it was beautiful. It wasn't just the words. It was the way Mr. Carter spoke them. The way he made them come alive, as if they weren't lines from a script, but something real, something breathing. By the time he reached the final lines, his voice was shaking with emotion. Keanu had seen a lot in his life. But this was magic. A second chance. When Mr. Carter finally finished, he stood there frozen, his chest rising and falling as if he had just run a marathon. He looked at Keanu, his eyes wide and filled with something new. Hope. Keanu stood up. "I told you," he said, smiling. "You still got it." Mr. Carter chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I forgot what it felt like," he admitted. Keanu's expression softened. "That's why we're here." Mr. Carter looked around the theater again, as if seeing it with new eyes. He walked to the center of the stage, standing taller than before. And Keanu knew, in that moment, that the fire had been reignited. This wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a beginning. And neither of them knew just how much the world was about to change because of it. The weight of the past. The old theater sat in silence, empty but still breathing with the echoes of its past. Mr. Lionel Carter stood on the stage, the wooden floor beneath his feet carrying decades of memories. For a moment, he had felt alive again, reciting Shakespeare, letting the words flow from his soul like they had never left him. But now, as the moment faded, reality came crashing back. He was no longer the man he used to be. He turned to Keanu, who stood in the front row, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "I can't do this," Mr. Carter murmured. Keanu tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "I'm an old man," Mr. Carter said, his voice strained. "No one wants an old, washed-up Teatro teacher. No one cares about the past." Keanu sighed, stepping forward. "That's not true," he said. "The past shapes who we are. And you shaped people like me. You still have something to give." Mr. Carter let out a bitter chuckle, shaking his head. "You don't understand, Keanu," he muttered. "I lost everything. My career, my home, my dignity." Keanu didn't flinch. "But you didn't lose your talent, and you didn't lose your passion." There was a long silence. Then, Keanu pulled out his phone and held it up. "I want to show you something. A name that still matters." Keanu tapped on his screen, and suddenly, a video began to play. At first, Mr. Carter didn't understand what he was looking at. The video showed a classroom full of students, young actors rehearsing scenes with intense emotion. Then one of the students, A young woman with curly hair and expressive eyes spoke. "My biggest inspiration." "That's easy," she said, smiling. "Lionel Carter." Mr. Carter's breath caught in his throat. "She was one of your students," Keanu said. "She's a big theater actress now, and she still remembers you." The video continued. "He taught me everything," the young woman said. "I wouldn't be where I am today without him." Mr. Carter stared at the screen, his hands trembling. Then, Keanu showed him another video. And another. One by one, former students appeared, talking about how Mr. Carter had shaped their lives, inspired them, pushed them toward greatness. Some were successful actors. Some were teachers themselves. Some were just people who had found confidence and purpose because of his classes, and every single one of them still remembered him. When the last video ended, Mr. Carter sat down slowly, his expression unreadable. For the first time in years, he realized. Maybe he hadn't been forgotten after all. An offer he couldn't ignore. Keanu sat down beside him. "I talked to David Monroe," he said. "He's offering you a chance to teach again." Mr. Carter frowned. "At his school?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah. They need an acting coach, someone who knows the craft, someone who's been through the real struggles of this industry." Mr. Carter stared at the stage beneath him. His whole life had been dedicated to theater. He had once lived for it, breathed it. But after so many years, he wasn't sure if he had the strength to go back. Keanu could see the hesitation in his eyes. "Look," Keanu said, his voice gentle but firm. "This isn't about money. It's not about fixing the past. It's about doing what you love again." Mr. Carter let out a shaky breath. "I don't know if I can," he admitted. "What if I fail?" Keanu smiled. "You taught me that failure is just another lesson." That made Mr. Carter chuckle softly, shaking his head. "Damn," he muttered. "You were actually paying attention all those years ago." Keanu grinned. "Yeah, and I still am." There was a long silence as Mr. Carter stared at the stage. Then, finally, he spoke. "All right." Keanu's eyebrows raised. "All right. I'll do it," Mr. Carter said, nodding slowly. "I'll give it a shot." Keanu broke into a smile. But Mr. Carter held up a hand. "But on one condition." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Mr. Carter smirked. "You take one of my classes." Keanu laughed, shaking his head. "Oh, come on, man. I think I've done enough acting." "Doesn't matter," Mr. Carter said. "You still got a lot to learn." Keanu sighed dramatically, but then grinned. All right. I'll do it." Mr. Carter leaned back in his chair, his eyes drifting to the ceiling. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose again. And for the first time in years, he wasn't just existing. He was living. The first day back. The next morning, Keanu drove Mr. Carter to David Monroe's acting school. The moment they stepped inside, something changed. The smell of stage makeup and old wooden floors, the distant voices of students rehearsing, the energy of a place filled with passion and creativity. It was intoxicating. Mr. Carter felt his heart pounding in his chest. He had spent so many years lost, forgotten, invisible. But now he was walking into a place where he mattered again. David Monroe met them at the front. "Mr. Carter," he said, offering his hand. "It's an honor to have you here." Mr. Carter hesitated before shaking his hand. "The honor's mine," he said softly. They led him into a classroom filled with eager young students, all wide-eyed and ready to learn. As he stood in front of them, the weight of the past fell away. This was his place. This was his home. Mr. Carter took a deep breath. "All right," he said, a small smile forming on his lips. "Let's begin." And just like that, the legend had returned. A past that won't stay buried. The first day at David Monroe's acting academy had been nothing short of surreal for Mr. Lionel Carter. Standing in front of a class full of bright-eyed students had brought back a flood of memories, a sense of belonging he thought he had lost forever. But as much as Keanu Reeves had helped him take this step forward, there was something nagging at the back of his mind. A shadow of the past, a weight he hadn't fully escaped. And that weight was about to come crashing down on him. The return to teaching. The students sat in a semicircle around Mr. Carter, their faces filled with anticipation. Most of them had heard about him through whispers, old stories from seasoned actors. But to them, he was a mystery. A man who had vanished from the industry for years. One of the students, a young man with curly brown hair and sharp eyes, raised his hand. "Sir," he said cautiously, "are you the same Lionel Carter who trained some of the biggest actors in Hollywood?" Mr. Carter smirked. "Depends," he said, crossing his arms. "Are you asking because you want to learn, or because you're trying to see if an old man still has anything left to offer?" A few students chuckled. The young man shrugged. "A little of both." Mr. Carter studied the class, nodding to himself. This was his moment. He wasn't here to prove himself. He was here to teach. And so he began. He talked about the art of expression, the importance of feeling the moment, of becoming a character instead of playing one. He demonstrated, using an old Shakespearean monologue, pouring every ounce of emotion into the words. By the time he finished, the entire class was silent, breathless. Then, applause. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was real, raw appreciation. And in that moment, Mr. Carter knew he was truly back. An unwelcome face from the past. Later that evening, as Keanu and Mr. Carter left the academy, a voice cut through the night air. "Well, well, I never thought I'd see the day." Mr. Carter froze. The voice was too familiar, one he had once feared, one he had once trusted, and been betrayed by. Slowly, he turned. A man stepped out from the shadows of the parking lot, his expensive suit sharp, his graying hair slicked back. Richard Langston, Mr. Carter's old business partner, and the man responsible for ruining his career. Keanu immediately sensed the tension in the air. He stepped forward slightly, placing himself between the two men, but Mr. Carter gently touched his arm, a silent signal to stand down. Richard smirked, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. "I have to say, Lionel, I never expected to see you back in a classroom." His voice was smooth, but laced with condescension. "I figured you'd still be on the streets." Mr. Carter's jaw clenched. Keanu's eyes darkened. "Who is this guy?" Keanu asked, his voice low. Mr. Carter exhaled sharply. "This is the man who made sure I had nothing left," he said. Richard chuckled. "Oh, come on, Lionel. That's a little dramatic, don't you think?" He shook his head. "I didn't take anything from you. You lost everything on your own." Keanu tensed. "What did he do?" Keanu asked, looking at Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter hesitated, as if debating whether or not to dig up the past. Then, finally, he spoke. A betrayal that changed everything. Years ago, before Mr. Carter had lost everything, he had been on the verge of something great. He and Richard had been business partners, running a successful theater company together. But Richard had been greedy. He had stolen funds, falsified contracts, and pinned the financial ruin of the theater on Mr. Carter. By the time the dust settled, Mr. Carter had lost everything: his career, his reputation, his home. And Richard? He had walked away clean, using his connections to escape the scandal unharmed. Keanu gritted his teeth, his fists clenching. "All those years," Mr. Carter muttered, "I kept thinking about what I lost. And now, here you are, still dressed in expensive suits, still thinking you own the world." Richard sighed dramatically. "Come on, Lionel," he said. "Why hold on to the past? I actually came here to make you an offer." Mr. Carter's eyes narrowed. Richard pulled a folder from his briefcase, handing it over. "There's a new production in the works. A huge one. I know you're teaching now, but wouldn't you rather be on the stage again?" Keanu grabbed the folder before Mr. Carter could. He flipped it open. It was a contract. And not just any contract. It was an offer for a starring role in one of the biggest productions of the year. Keanu's eyes widened. "This is real," he murmured. Richard smirked. "Of course it's real. I have influence, Keanu. You should know that." Mr. Carter was silent. Keanu turned to him. "Sir," he said, voice careful, "this is everything you ever wanted. A chance to be on stage again, to prove everyone wrong." Mr. Carter stared at the folder. The theater world had shut him out years ago. And now it was welcoming him back. But at what cost? He looked up at Richard. "Why are you doing this?" Richard's smirk didn't falter. "Because I owed you." Mr. Carter's stomach twisted. He didn't believe that for a second. But the temptation was overwhelming. Years of struggle. Years of obscurity. And now, in his hands, was a ticket back to everything he had lost. Keanu watched him carefully, knowing this moment could change everything. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Mr. Carter closed the folder and handed it back. "No." Richard's smile faded. Mr. Carter took a deep breath. "I don't need your offers. I don't need your money. And I sure as hell don't need a favor from the man who ruined me." Keanu's chest swelled with pride. Richard scoffed, slipping the folder back into his briefcase. "Well then," he said, turning away. "Enjoy teaching. I'm sure it'll pay the bills." And with that, he disappeared into the night. Keanu turned to Mr. Carter, expecting to see anger, regret, sadness. But instead, Mr. Carter was smiling. Keanu raised an eyebrow. "You okay?" Mr. Carter let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for years. "For the first time in a long time," he said, "I think I am." And for the first time in forever, Lionel Carter wasn't haunted by the past. He was finally free. A test of strength. The night air in Los Angeles was crisp as Keanu Reeves, and Mr. Lionel Carter walked away from the confrontation with Richard Langston. The weight of old betrayals, shattered dreams, and years of hardship still lingered, but something had changed. For the first time in years, Mr. Carter had chosen himself. Not money, not revenge, not a desperate grasp at the past. Just himself, his dignity, his purpose, his future. And yet, as they reached the parking lot, Keanu could see the tension still tight in his mentor's shoulders. "You sure you're okay?" Keanu asked, his voice low. Mr. Carter stopped, staring up at the moonlit sky, taking a deep breath. "No," he admitted, "but I think I will be." Keanu nodded. "That's enough for today." They got in the car and drove back home, the city lights flickering around them. But neither of them knew that the biggest challenge was still ahead. Stepping into the future. The next morning, Keanu woke up to the smell of coffee. It wasn't unusual, except for the fact that Mr. Carter had never been the one to make it. Walking into the kitchen, Keanu found his former teacher standing by the stove, a mug in one hand and an old script in the other. The sight made Keanu smile. "You're up early," he said. Mr. Carter glanced at him. "Couldn't sleep." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Bad dreams?" Mr. Carter shook his head. "Actually, no," he said. "For the first time in a long time, I wasn't haunted by the past. I was thinking about the future." Keanu grinned, grabbing a coffee mug. "That's a good sign," he said. Mr. Carter chuckled. "Yeah, but it also means I have a lot of work to do." Keanu sipped his coffee. "You're talking about your students?" Mr. Carter nodded, flipping through the script. "They're good," he said, "but they need something more. They need to be pushed." Keanu smirked. "Oh, I remember those days." Mr. Carter laughed, shaking his head. "Trust me, Keanu," he said. "You were one of the toughest students I ever had. But you had fire." Keanu shrugged. "And you gave me direction." Mr. Carter fell silent for a moment, his gaze dropping back to the script. Then he took a deep breath. "I want to give them that same direction," he said. "I want to give them a chance to be great." Keanu nodded, a small smile forming. "Then let's make that happen." The challenge that changed everything. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Carter poured himself into his teaching. The students at David Monroe's Acting Academy were eager, hungry for knowledge, and ready to learn. But Mr. Carter didn't just teach them how to act. He taught them how to feel, how to break past their fears, how to breathe life into their characters. And for the first time in years, he felt like himself again. But just as things were falling into place, something unexpected happened. David Monroe called him into his office one afternoon, his expression unreadable. "There's a competition," David said, "one of the biggest in the country, a showcase for the best acting schools." Mr. Carter raised an eyebrow, and David leaned forward. "I want you to prepare our students for it." Silence. Mr. Carter's heart pounded. This wasn't just any competition. It was the most prestigious event in the acting world, one that had launched countless careers. And now, after everything, David wanted him to lead the next generation onto that stage. It was an opportunity of a lifetime. But it was also a risk, a massive risk. Because if he failed, if his students failed, then everything he had been building could come crashing down again. For a moment, doubt crept in. But then he heard Keanu's voice in his head. "You still got it." Taking a deep breath, Mr. Carter looked David in the eyes. "All right," he said. "Let's do this." Training like never before. The weeks that followed were grueling. Mr. Carter didn't hold back. He pushed his students harder than they had ever been pushed before. He made them rehearse for hours, breaking down every scene, every emotion, every movement. Some of them cried. Some of them almost quit. But every single one of them grew. Keanu watched from the sidelines, impressed. He had seen great directors, great coaches, great teachers. But what Mr. Carter was doing, this was something else entirely. This was reviving a lost art. And as the competition day drew closer, something incredible happened. People started talking. Word spread through the acting community about a legendary teacher making a comeback. And soon, the world was watching. The night of the competition, the auditorium was packed. Every seat was filled, and the judges were some of the biggest names in Hollywood. Mr. Carter stood backstage, his students buzzing with nerves. He could see the fear in their eyes. And so, he did what he had always done best. He stepped in front of them and spoke. "Listen to me," he said, his voice calm. "You are not just actors tonight. You are storytellers, and the world is waiting to hear what you have to say." The students nodded, their confidence growing. Then Mr. Carter stepped aside, and the curtains lifted. A standing ovation. The performance was breathtaking. Every student gave their all, delivering a show so powerful that even the judges sat in stunned silence. And when it ended, the entire room erupted in applause. Mr. Carter stood in the wings, tears in his eyes. Keanu, sitting in the front row, rose to his feet, clapping the loudest of all. And at that moment, Lionel Carter knew. He was back. He wasn't just a man who had been forgotten. He was a legend. And now, the world knew it too. A curtain call to destiny. The applause roared through the grand theater like a tidal wave, crashing against the walls, echoing in the rafters. For a long moment, Mr. Lionel Carter stood in the shadows of the wings, watching his students on stage, their faces lit with the golden glow of victory. He had spent years lost, forgotten, wandering through life like a man without a place. But tonight, the world had remembered his name. The aftermath of greatness. The standing ovation lasted for nearly a minute, the audience cheering, clapping, whistling. Some were even wiping tears from their eyes. The performance had been more than just good, it had been unforgettable. Keanu Reeves, standing in the front row, clapped until his hands ached. He had seen blockbuster films, Broadway-level plays, and Oscar-winning performances. But this had soul. This was pure, raw storytelling, brought to life by students who had once doubted themselves. And at the center of it all, the man who had taught them how to believe. The moment of truth. Backstage, the students rushed toward Mr. Carter, their faces filled with pure joy and exhaustion. "We did it, Mr. Carter," one of them beamed. Another student, a young woman with trembling hands, wiped away a tear. I never thought I could do this, but you believed in us." Mr. Carter smiled, his eyes misty. "No," he said softly, "you believed in yourselves. That's what made the difference." Just then, David Monroe appeared, his expression unreadable. The room fell silent. David was known for being blunt, brutally honest, and hard to impress. Slowly, he walked up to Mr. Carter. And then, he extended his hand. "That," David said, his voice thick with admiration, "was one of the finest performances I've seen in my entire career." A collective gasp went through the students. Keanu, standing at the edge of the group, grinned proudly. Mr. Carter hesitated before shaking David's hand. The old wounds of their past, the time when David had to let him go, the years of separation, the pain of being forgotten, seemed to fade in that single handshake. "You gave these kids something real," David continued. "And now, I want you to give it to even more." Mr. Carter frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" David pulled out a contract. "I'm offering you a full-time position here, head of the advanced theater program." A few students gasped. Keanu's eyes widened slightly. And Mr. Carter? He just stared. For so many years, he had felt like an outcast, like someone who no longer had a place in the world. But now he was being offered a legacy, a chance to train generations of actors, to keep the art of storytelling alive. A lump formed in his throat. I don't know what to say," he admitted. David chuckled. "Say yes." Mr. Carter exhaled. And then, he did. The room erupted in cheers. Keanu patted his shoulder, a smirk on his face. "Guess this means you're officially back," he said. Mr. Carter let out a deep breath, his smile filled with a peace he hadn't felt in decades. "Yeah," he murmured. "I guess I am." A call from the past. Later that night, after the celebration had settled, Mr. Carter sat in Keanu's home, staring at a glass of whiskey on the table in front of him. Not drinking it, just staring. Keanu sat across from him, watching quietly. "You all right?" Keanu finally asked. Mr. Carter sighed. "I spent so many years thinking my life was over," he said softly. "And now, suddenly, I have a future again." Keanu nodded. "That's a good thing." Mr. Carter looked up. "It is," he admitted, "but it also made me realize something." Keanu tilted his head. "What's that?" Mr. Carter hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, yellowed envelope. Keanu watched curiously as Mr. Carter set it on the table. "I have a son," Mr. Carter said, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu's eyes widened slightly. "He doesn't know what happened to me," Mr. Carter continued. "I walked out of his life when he was a teenager. I thought I was protecting him. Thought I was sparing him the shame of having a father who lost everything." Keanu stayed silent, letting him speak. "But now," Mr. Carter sighed, "now I realize that maybe I was just running away." Keanu leaned forward. "You think he still wants to hear from you?" Mr. Carter let out a breath. "I don't know," he admitted, "but it's time I find out." Keanu nodded. "Then let's find him. A final chapter, a new beginning." The next day, Keanu and Mr. Carter sat in front of a computer screen, looking at a social media page. And there, staring back at them, was a young man in his 30s, his profile filled with pictures of a life well lived. A family. A career. A future that had continued, even without Mr. Carter in it. The old man swallowed hard, his fingers trembling. "You don't have to do this alone," Keanu said gently. Mr. Carter took a deep breath. And then, he clicked Send Message. A few moments later, a notification popped up. Typing. Keanu and Mr. Carter stared at the screen, frozen. Then, a message appeared. "Dad, A single tear slipped down Mr. Carter's face, and for the first time in decades he knew his story wasn't over.